Всем привет, ребята! Я просто безумно счастлива, потому что сегодня вы познакомитесь с Джейсоном Луомой. С Джейсоном я познакомилась сама в Тбилиси, когда он проводил тренинг по терапии принятия ответственности. Дело в том, что в России сейчас проходит проект, где мы пытаемся понять, насколько такая терапия может быть полезна для того, чтобы снизить стигматизацию у людей, у которых есть ВИЧ и у которых есть наркозаболевания. Джейсон является клиническим психологом, исследователем, и еще он в 2007 году организовал частную клинику в Портленде. Данная частная клиника, она очень уникальна, она построена на такой достаточно интересной модели. Дело в том, что деньги от клинической работы идут на научную и образовательную деятельность. То есть в его клинике он не только оказывает лечебную, какую-то работу, но еще и научную, и на основании своих научных данных он может, соответственно, улучшать свою клиническую работу. Кроме того, у него есть несколько постдоков, то есть людей, которые занимаются наукой, помогают ему, и он занимается их образованием и образованием людей, которые заинтересованы методом психотерапии, в частности, терапии принятия и ответственности. Кроме того, Джейсон является таким просветителем. У него на сайте клиники есть блог, он ведет подкасты, где он разговаривает с учеными о различных проблемах, с которыми они сталкиваются в ходе исследований, и, собственно, об их работе. Ну и он сам тоже рассказывает о том, чем он занимается. У Джейсона есть две книжки, которые он написал про терапию принятия ответственности. Первая вышла в 2007 году. Это такой мануал для клинических психологов, что такое терапия принятия ответственности, основные ее базовые ключевые моменты. И вторая книжка вышла недавно, в этом году, и она именно о ценностях. Дело в том, что ценности являются таким вот именно корнем терапии принятия ответственности, и понимание ценностей является основой для того, чтобы жить жизнью, наполненной смыслом, и для того, чтобы развить психологическую гибкость. Джейсон считает, что помощь пациентам должна быть основана на двух вещах. Это на сердце психотерапевта, психолога и на научных знаниях. То есть одно без другого существовать не может. И вы понимаете, что, конечно, когда я это узнала, для меня это настолько близко, и мне кажется, это абсолютно верно, что голая наука — это просто статистика и таблички какие-то, это абсолютно далеко от помощи, которая происходит в реальной жизни. Но и просто сердцем, просто на основе того, что ты хочешь помочь, ты тоже не можешь оказать нормальную помощь. То есть ты должен и быть сочувствующим человеком, но и знать, что такое наука, какие научные есть доказательства того или иного метода. Вот, поэтому я считаю, вот этот вот баланс между наукой и таким вот сердечным отношением — это прям ключ к адекватной помощи человеку с проблемами зависимости. Основой работы у Джейсона является это методы, которые пришли из когнитивно-поведенческой терапии, в частности, это терапия принятия ответственности, про которую я, кстати, уже рассказывала немножко в видео. Я оставлю тоже ссылку внизу, чтобы вы прочитали, вернее, посмотрели, что это такое. И еще на диалектическо-поведенческой терапии. Это такая терапия, которая основана на осознанности, на том, чтобы быть в настоящем. И, кстати, в нашей беседе с ним мы затронули эту тему в самом конце, поэтому вот обязательно до конца посмотрите. Мне кажется, это один из таких самых важных аспектов, который мне тоже на самом деле очень помог разобраться, что это такое. Обязательно загляните на сайт Портлендской психотерапевтической клиники. Там вы можете прочитать побольше о работе этой клиники и, собственно, можете также почитать блог и послушать подкасты, которые Джейсон создал. А сейчас я вас приглашаю, собственно, быть свидетелем нашей беседы. Ну что, погнали?
Hi, Jason. Hi. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just don't see this message. Okay, I am actually ready to go. Yeah. Skype is probably not my thing.
Yes, the question was something around what does it mean to be able to carry your shame, right?
Yeah.
And if the kind of core problem, or at least a core problem with shame, is that avoidance of it. So the shame shows up, and then you do anything you can to be not in contact with that, to not be aware of yourself and check out. Then what we're trying to do is help people to stay present, while this emotion washes over them, and not to retreat into escape somehow. And all of the different tools that they may have, and the most problematic being the substance use, if this is addiction. So we help people learn how to be able to be present, to be able to embrace it, to be able to feel it in their bodies, rather than kind of distract and focus on something else or take a substance to get rid of it. And then the compassion parts, you also asked about compassion, and so another part of that is often to be able to learn how to, rather than kind of feed that shame by attacking yourself and kind of piling on and criticizing yourself for these things that happened in the past, to be able to turn towards yourself as a friend, and to be able to respond to yourself in a way that you would, the same sort of way you'd want to respond to a good friend. And so we might even talk to people about that. Like if you had a friend who was feeling this way, what would you want for them? And how might you show that? And then how can you do that with yourself? So all of these ways of kind of opening up and making room for the shame, and then from that place turning towards your values, turning towards what is important, not staying there and just kind of wallowing, but to turn towards what matters to you, and take the next step. That's just part of living.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, like, when you talk about values, and when I think and I think most of the people think about, this is like drug user. So like we kind of, mostly in general public, like we use this kind of word, and also it's kind of understanding.
Well, usually a lot more.
Yeah.
Usually a lot more pejorative words than that, more like addict or
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and the question, like, what is, like, do these people have actually values? Like, which values do they have? I mean, like, and I think it's very, very popular understanding of these people, like people with like substance use disorder. So they have like nothing like saint, so they don't have something very valuable. So the only thing that they want is drugs. And how you think, like, I mean, like, this is one of the important, like, from one point, on one hand, it's like shame and all of this like pain and like some negative like feelings about themselves, but also on the other hand, it's like self like it's ignoring, avoidance, and all of this. So, and also it's like substance use, which actually physically help you to get rid all of these like negative like thoughts, feelings, sensations. And I mean, it's, for me, it's kind of hard to thinking about how we put a person in a situation, then they actually get rid from the drugs, so they get rid from this like physical like treatment, and they actually feel physically bad, and I mean, and also psychologically like really bad about this. And we are also trying them to face with the like other negative like what is the like under of this like negative. So it's, for me, it's kind of so overwhelming for person probably. So, and like what is and on other hand, when you talk about like this, like to help people to be in present, to like be compassionate to yourself, it's also, I think it's true for most of the people. So they not really like acknowledge what happened, like they not really, a lot of people live in present moment, like mostly live in past or future, like, or something that like, and it's kind of very universal thing. But also when we add on this person also like substance use disorder, so it's make all of this like just like more like mess. And I mean, how you think that what is the answer? Like how to help people to be in present with their like a lot of painful like things, like emotions, thoughts, like all of this. Yeah. So how like acceptance commitment therapy helps this population?
Yeah, well, what you talked about in terms of the public's idea that people with substance use problems have no values, that is the stigma that they're dealing with, and because it's just not true that people who have problems with addiction are not in any fundamental way different than anybody else, and they still have people that they care about. They still have things that they want to do in life. They still have spiritual interests. They still would like to have good health. All the sort of things that most people want, and they want to contribute to others and be a contributor to society and to people they care about. And the problem is they have this behavior that's been conditioned now for whatever reason that isn't working very well. That's really causing potentially a lot of harm. Depending on how severe their addiction is. And there's a gradient of it as well, right? Some people can have substance use that's somewhat problematic and mildly problematic, or can be severe and just wrecking their whole life. And the process of engaging in treatment and being willing to face the pain of life without the substance is courageous thing. It's very difficult, and then on top of that, if you're someone with substance use, you don't just have the pain of life that you need to face without this buffer in the substance that kind of creates a buffer between you and this pain. But you also then have to deal with all the people around you that if they know anything about your substance use history, they're going to give you fewer chances. They're going to be more likely to reject you. They're not going to trust you as much. Because of that history, you've got the deck is stacked against you. And so to engage in a treatment process as someone with that sort of history it's like, why would anybody do that? It's so hard. And yet some people choose to do that, and oftentimes like a big part of why they choose to do it is actually their values. It's because they see the harm that's happening. It's because they see that other people are suffering because of their addiction, or they see that their own health is suffering, or that it often has linked to their values in a very central way, that they would do that really hard work that it usually is to start to live a sober life. And and ACT there's lots of therapies that can be helpful, and not just therapies like psychotherapies, but medication assisted treatment and things like that, especially with opiate addiction. And ACT is one of several, and it kind of targets that basic problem of disconnection from your values. That's part of substance use. You get disconnected from the present moment, from what matters to you, and you just get caught up in that pattern of avoidance every day, every hour, and that's it. And that's some of what is really at the core of what we're trying to help people with.
Do you remember one of the probably a case or story, like your patient, like before you have the clinical practice, and maybe you have some like most memorable case, or maybe not a case, but like something like insights like during your work, like which you would like to share like with like person who start to interested in ACT, like this therapy, like maybe, yeah, maybe just like scary things, like maybe it's like, I don't know, funny things, like I don't know, like any, like what else, like mostly what I'm trying to ask you is like what there are, like as you said, there are a lot of things to do with patient with substance use disorder, and like a lot of like psychotherapy techniques, but you choose like this ACT, and like you work with like very specific option. And I just interested, like maybe like during your work with patient, you have some experience when you see that, oh, like this is like help this person, and this help because like this like kind of like core thing that it's like on this therapy help to him or her. So yeah, it's just interesting, like maybe you have some like successful story, or I don't know, anything that you just like can like memorize from your like clinical practice.
I don't tend to be really good at kind of calling up examples, specific examples of things. One thing that does come to mind for me is one of the groups that we did. So there was in the initial study that was part of developing this intervention for shame and self-stigma around addiction. One of the exercises we would do some of the times, and depending upon the group and how, if it was a supportive group, we would do this exercise. And the exercise was that we had one of the people in the group get up and imagine that they were attending their own funeral. And different people, we would kind of get them standing up, put some kind of chairs out in front of them and say, okay, here's your coffin. This is where your body is. And then we would ask them, like, who's coming to your funeral? Who would be there if you were to die today? And it's like, oh, my mom. And there was this guy that came up, this younger guy, and he volunteered. And, this is a very brave thing to do. And, he imagined his mom being there, and he imagined his brother being there, and he imagined his best friend being there. And we asked him to say, so if you were to die today, like, what would they say? And he talked about the various things that they would say. It's like, I love my little, his mom. Imagine his mom saying, we asked him to narrate it, that I love my little boy, he was always such a beautiful child. And yet, like, when he became a teenager, he just headed down a dark road, and, I lost him, and I completely lost contact with him. And, and I feel so sad about, him dying. And then, his brother, he imagined his brother talking about the split in their relationship and how disappointed he was in him, and his sister, and his best friend. I'm talking about how he was kind of inconsistent and wasn't always there for him. And you could imagine what that would be like to relate that, the kind of really coming into contact with the regrets and kind of ways in which he hadn't been there for the people in his life. And so then we would have other people role play those people. So somebody come up and be the mom and actually say those things, and the brother and the best friend, and say those things. And then we did another, so, and we were coaching him to stay present for that, to not shut off, to not close down, to kind of show up and be there with all of the feelings that were coming up as he kind of confronted this, as he faced this kind of the state of his life and the state of his relationships. And then we did a second round, which was to imagine that he made the changes he was hoping to make in his life. That he stopped using drugs, that he kind of, started to be the son that he wanted to be to his mom, that he started to be the brother that he hoped to be, that he started to be the friend that he wanted to be. And we kind of had him talk a little bit about like what that would be.
Yeah.
And then we had him imagine, so now let's imagine it's 20 years from now or 40 years from now, and now it's your next funeral. So you've lived this new life, this life that is who you wish you were, and now you've died, and these same people are there. What would they say this time? And his mom gets up and talks about how great a son he was, and how he was always there for her, and she knew that he would support her, and how much proud she was of him. And then, the brother says these kind of similar things, and so we have him say those things, and then we have other people come up and play those characters out, and he kind of sees his mom saying these things, and he always hopes. And so through this exercise, this is this process of helping the person on the one hand to kind of confront and get present to the really painful things and maybe shameful things that have happened in their life, and be supported in that by the therapist, but also there was a whole group there that was rooting for him and wanting him to be successful, be compassionate to himself. And then, but also bringing in the values, like in a grounded and emotionally full way, to connect with like his intentions of who he wanted to be, in this kind of dream of an imagined self in the future that he could strive for.
Yeah.
And, that was a particularly powerful group. Not every group's like that. That's hard to do that. It's very hard to, not everybody is at a place where they can do that. And yet I think that was a particularly powerful group, and I think really captures those two elements of, acceptance, helping the person to come into contact with the hard stuff and show up to it, make space for it, and the commitment, and of helping them to contact really what is most important in life, really what's at the heart of who you want to be, and to show up for that, and to take action and to get moving. And I think that's the kind of thing that when I'm doing this kind of therapy, those are the kind of things that I'm striving to create for people, is these experiences that will shift their life direction. It's like in therapy, if say a person comes into therapy and they're headed in this direction, our job in therapy isn't to like take them and move them from like here to here. Our job in therapy is to like get their direction to move some. Because if you take that new direction out for a year, you'll be in a very different place. You don't need to get the person there. You just need to get that direction shifted, and that's what we're trying to do, in acceptance and commitment therapy. So.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I think this is amazing. For me, it's also like it's important that it's like true part of this, not just to live like to thinking about like what people thinking about you if you die right now, but also like what if you can change something, and what is like it's kind of like to live like two lives, like, and to imagine like different like lives, different ways. I think this is why most of people like really have a lot of like fear to talk with themselves and to talk about these like painful things, because they don't think that what can be like do next, and you just like need to accept. And I mean commitment is also kind of very important part of this, like kind of what you can.
And that's part of why we need other people, right? So like in addictions treatment, there's usually engagement with the recovery community. Like most people need a recovery community, need people who are there to support them, because part of those people's job, whether that's a therapist or someone else, is to remind them that there's more to life than what they see right now, and that there's more potential in them than what they can imagine right now, and to remind them that they care, and remind them who they care about, what they care about, and help them to be in contact with that. And that's why we need other people. And that's part of what it's so problematic about addiction, is that it typically, it really cuts people off from other people. It isolates people. It separates people in all kinds of ways.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also cut them from the community from both sides. They all don't want to be, and the community don't want. So,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that you also do, like when I see like on your website that you do this like podcast, like you like this like family support podcast, and like there are a lot of information like what to do with when your like partner, when your like family member become addicted, and like how to
Oh, right.
talk with and I think this is like one of the very important things, and also like how like public look on these people, and how you think that it can be changed. So for example, this is like why I also like talk with you and why I ask you to participate in this podcast, because I think that one of the thing that should be done is talk more about this, and show community that addiction is not like the end of their life, and it's just
Right.
like more option to thinking about this. And I just thinking about like how you like what is your way of thinking of how it can be improved, because I think it's really hard to change someone's mind, like mindset. And I mean, if you just post something like on your blog and like several people just like read or like listen it, it's not really like change the community. And I just thinking about like how this what can we actually do on like our position as like researchers. And I just like your blog, like your like site was really inspired me on like when I look at this, and I think, oh my gosh, like even like we don't have it's in Russian. I mean, I go through like several sites about like addiction, and we have a lot of sites with kind of trash information, and it's not really helpful. And actually, there are a lot of different and not really like quality, good, like high quality information. I mean, it's mostly like just give us your money, and and also I
Right.
just noticed, yeah, and also
There's a
like,
lot of not good treatment, especially in the addictions world, you know.
yeah. Do you know this show Intervention, like this TV show?
Right, yeah.
It's just like,
yeah, it's sensationalized,
yeah. So and there are a lot of this stuff like in Russia also. And I just feel when I saw all of this, I think, oh my gosh, like we should do something about this, because like people who kind of like know like also about this, and why like we also like have a voice, like, and but it's also kind of hard to do something about this. And like for example, I couldn't like alone, or, like, and maybe I don't like it's more maybe not for audience, maybe it's just like for me, but like how you look at this, like how you think that can be like what we actually can do like on our position right now.
And you're meaning to change societal stigma?
Yeah. I mean, in when we talk on like public, like, and how they about the community and how they separate themselves from people, like what is
so
the message?
that would be and that's what I would call public stigma, right? So it's the things that the larger community does to disadvantage, people who have the stigmatized condition. So and so based on negative stereotypes of people with that problem. So I mean it's very difficult. I mean, from a research standpoint, it's something that hasn't been studied that well, and so from a research standpoint, it's hard to know like what are evidence-based things to do for public stigma reduction. And so I'd say one of the main things is like we need to do the research. It would be great to have more people involved in research on stigma reduction, and whether that's funders who are willing to fund it, people who are willing to do the work, all of those sort of things. And that's part of why what Karsten's doing is great, because he's actually getting the grants and doing the work on, trying to develop the research, and then hopefully from there the organizations and everything that one would need to develop this. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult. How do we? When I think about what I've done personally, I think my main strategy has been to try to support communities in approaching people, whether that's with addiction or anything, in a way that is more empowering, less stigmatizing, less judgmental. That includes, paying attention to the language you use. So not calling people addicts or junkies, or, and referring to them in ways that are more respectful and less pejorative. That includes like the ways that you conceptualize the problems that people have, that rather than that they're, people who are bad and want to, are just bad people who, that they're people who are having a hard time and struggling like the rest of us are. And it just happens to manifest in this way. And how do we create communities that have a more kind of nurturing, caring, altruistic, cooperative approach to each other, especially in these current times where, at least in the United States, we seem to be in a period of very high levels of lack of cooperation, lots of in and out group kinds of things, and lots of judgment and lots of attacking, and not a lot of like coming together, except small groups of things. How do we foster those things? Working on.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm a psychologist, so it's like this isn't. In some ways, that's not as much my area. It's like how do you create societal change?
Yeah. I just you kind of you do a lot of you did already a lot of work on this, so that's why it's really I thank you for sharing your experience on this. So it's really
Sure, yeah, of course.
for me. Yeah, that's perfect. So in my probably last question, so it's probably most about your future direction. I mean what is your right now, what is your plan for now, and what do you think you will do in next 5, 10, 50, 20 years
Well, the way I could answer that question best is that I'm trying not to plan so much.
Why so?
I'm someone who has been, if I think about pretty much my whole career, including graduate school, I've always been someone who had a plan. I knew where I wanted to get in 5 years, and I had a sense of what my goals were, and I, had plans for, so what do I have to do in the next year? What do I have to do in the next 6 months? What do I have to do this month? And I kind of had that. And I think because I was so much thinking about the future and of the larger, maybe kind of strategy of how to move ahead and move towards my goals, I developed a pattern of really getting out of contact with what really brings me a sense of energy and life, and what I'm curious about on a day-to-day basis. I think things like that, so I'm in a phase now. As I'm getting older, I'm seeing that life seems to come in phases. Like you have these phases. It could be 5 years, it could be 20 years, but there's this phase where there's this sort of a stability to it, and you're you're doing a lot of the same things, and then something shifts and you move to a new phase. It's like you were here and now you're here. And I feel like I'm sort of going through a shift, and part of it is this process of actually trying to, when my mind goes to the future and it's like, okay, so what do I need to do? Where do I want to be in a year? Or, what are my goals? I try to notice that and actually come back to being more today and be like, okay, so what would be interesting today? What calls to me right now? What feels like it has energy right now, or would give me energy if I were to do it and engage in it? And so I'm trying to bring more balance in that way. And so in that way, I'm kind of making less commitments and sort of holding my goals more lightly right now. So I guess what I would say is I would say if I were to say, I think I would be making something up at this point. But you kind of have a sense of some of the research I'm doing and where I'm heading.
Yeah.
I mean, so those things will continue in some way.
Yeah. I think it's perfect transfer. Like being in present.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jason.
That's what I'm working on. And it's part of trying to be kinder to myself as well. Pay attention to what I need and what would be good for me, rather than kind of forcing myself to do what I think I should be doing. Which is something I've done a lot in the past. So.
Thank you. I feel that I'm like right now, I'm kind of on consultation with psychologist because what I hear right now is like it's so. I'm like last couple like weeks I just thinking about like what is my future is like what I supposed to like, and it's like it's a lot of overthinking about this, and it's just like I feel like that I'm stuck, and it's kind of very but I feel that what you're just saying is really like I find it's very helpful.
And we need to think about the future, right? Like it's important that we think about the future, but when it gets out of balance, that's the problem, right? When we're doing it too much and we're not able to be here and connected with the opportunities that are present now, right? Then that's where we really we suffer, and so do other people, because we're not as present to them either. So
Thank you a lot.
Yeah.